All right, before I get started, I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in travel. So I want to tell you about another show I think you might like. It's called Greetings from Somewhere, and it's an immersive documentary-style podcast that explores road trip destinations throughout the U.S. Each episode takes a trip to weird artist hubs like Marfa, Texas, festivals like Burning Man, national parks like Joshua Tree, and even theme parks like Disney World. Think Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown meets Radiolab. Greetings from Somewhere is a travel show about what's happening beneath the surface of all these places we pass through on road trips, but don't have time to truly explore. You could subscribe to Greetings from Somewhere wherever you get your podcasts. This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian, popping into your feed with a special bonus episode today. It's a story from Justin and Patrice Levine, who've spent the past decade living a life of adventure. Justin and Patrice first met almost 2 decades ago at a hiking and climbing club in Phoenix, Arizona, where Justin was working on his master's degree in outdoor recreation. He was already an experienced backpacker by that point, but Patrice was more of a novice. Over time, she started learning, though, and in 2011, the two of them decided to head out on a 4-month hike on the Appalachian Trail. Now, after that trip, they originally planned to return to their normal lives working in the corporate world, but they ended up having such a great experience that they decided to instead try something different. So they quit their jobs and went on to run a backpacker hostel, lead tours, and work as professional camping gear testers while exploring parks and wilderness areas all across the United States. But all this time, there was this one trek that was in the back of their minds nagging them because it was something they hadn't yet had a chance to experience. Patrice said it was an idea she and Justin heard about all those years ago on their very first big hike.
While we were hiking on the Appalachian Trail, we encountered a woman from New Zealand who told us about this new trail that just opened up. It's called Araroa. It was going from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South Island, and it was roughly 3,000 kilometers and about 2,000 miles. And it just planted a seed. Over time, then we started to do more and more research, and it became evident that that was going to be our next long-distance hike. We thought, well, what better way to visit the country that is on our bucket list and do it the human-powered way?
So, Justin told me, they began planning their adventure.
We had friends who had visited New Zealand before, and we had talked to them just to get some information. Can you tell us a little bit about this or this aspect of New Zealand? And they said, we do want to tell you, wait till you meet the people there. And we're like, yeah, okay. Yeah, we've met friendly people too all over the U.S. and, Mexico and Canada. They said, just wait. And we said, okay, we'll see.
I think that for Justin and I, so much of our travel is just based on the outdoor adventure. It's about hiking the miles or getting to the high point or exploring the national park. And even though we love cultural experiences, it's usually a lower point on our priority list of being in a place. And so that was the same goal when we were going to New Zealand. It was about experiencing outdoor recreation, experiencing the land, the wild nature of the country, the rugged nature of the country.
But once they arrived, they quickly realized that this trip would be much different from others they had taken in the past.
Yeah, so the first about 100 miles of the trail was along a beach, and it was treacherous. You would think walking on the beach is wonderful. It's about, beach balls and picnic baskets and people frolic in the ocean. No, it was desolate, it was empty, and it was really rough on your feet. And after 4 days, we got to the end of the beach and we had to hitchhike to a town to resupply. So we're looking around and I noticed way off, I noticed a police officer and he's actually pulling someone out of the sand whose car got stuck. And I said to her, I'm going over to ask this police officer where the best place to hitchhike is. And at this point, we didn't realize, hitchhiking in New Zealand, we didn't know what the rules were, if there were laws or anything like that. So Patrice is like, I don't know if I'd go ask him. And I'm like, I'm just going to do it. What's the worst he says? He could say, don't do it. So I walked up to this police officer and I said, we just finished walking from Cape Ranga and we are looking to get to the town about 20 minutes away to get to this hostel and so we can resupply. I was like, could you point me in like what the best direction, where's the best road that I could hitchhike from? And he looks at me with this really confused look and he's like, hitchhike? It's like, why would you want to hitchhike? Just get in the car with me. I'll take you wherever you want to go. And we were both like, what? And he even said to Patrice, hey, hop in the front seat. You can ride up front. And, just being new here, Patrice actually hopped in the driver's seat. And he's like, you got to get on the other side there, you American. So super nice guy. And, in the United States, I don't really think a police officer would pick up someone hitchhiking and drive them 20 minutes away.
It turned out that hitchhiking is not only perfectly safe and legal in New Zealand, but it's actually a recommended form of travel that Justin and Patrice would end up resorting to on a regular basis throughout their trip whenever they needed a lift to the next closest town.
Everyone, they just wanted to see, what are these people with these poles and big backpacks and what are they doing? So they would pick us up and ask us questions. Postal workers would pick us up in their mail trucks. And I remember sitting in the back of the mail truck on top of boxes and stuff and the guy talking to us. And we had a tour bus pick us up once. A complete tour bus picked us and drove us like an hour or two. We had a wedding party pick us up once. They were in the middle of their wedding going to like a vineyard and they picked us up and drove us, I think an hour up the road. I think the most we ever waited was maybe 15, 20 minutes for a ride. I mean, there was one point where I made a sign to get to a town. We were leaving a hostel, and I made the sign out of cardboard, wrote on it where we needed to go, and we're walking down the street and had the sign like down along my leg because we hadn't got to the intersection we needed to. And this lady pulls over and she's like, I can barely read your sign. You don't even have it up high enough. Get in the car. I'm going there. So we had some rides from some amazing people.
Don't forget, we're dirty, stinky hikers. So for some of these folks picking us up, I'm thinking, you really want us to get in the car with you?
Yeah.
But it was, again, they really just wanted to meet these people that were walking. Who are these folks? And we want to have that conversation.
Now, as Patrice mentioned, the trail is called Te Araroa, which means the long path in the language of the indigenous Maori people. It had been decades in the planning, but when Patrice and Justin walked it in late 2014 and early 2015, it had only been open a few years, so many New Zealanders hadn't yet heard about it, and the sight of long-distance hikers visiting from the other side of the world still seemed like a novelty.
We were walking on a paved river walk in a more populated area, and so we were getting a lot of looks from people. And there was this family sitting on a park bench and a little baby bouncing on the woman's knee. And she called out to us and said, hey, what are you two doing? And so we start to tell her about the trail, just, 2-3 sentences. And she asked where we're staying tonight. So we said, we're going to be staying in a hostel. We haven't made a reservation yet, but we know there's a lot of hostels in town. So that's where we're going to do. And we're going to spend some time resupplying, taking a shower, and doing laundry. And she stood up and said, no, you're not. You are coming home with us. She didn't even check with her husband. She just said that, made that statement, and that was after a maybe 5-minute conversation. Yeah. So they took us home. They ended up cooking us dinner, breakfast, telling us to do as many loads of laundry that we wanted, and camping there on their lawn. And then the next morning, she knew that we also wanted to play tourist a little bit as we were walking through New Zealand. She said, listen, I'm going to drive you over to Hobbiton. You guys need to do it because we are so close to it right now.
So Hobbiton is where, Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies were filmed, and the set is still there. It's a huge popular tourist attraction. You have to reserve spots to go visit it. And so it sells out far in advance. And she checked the night before and she said, online it says it's sold out. But before we got up, she had called and asked.
And made us a reservation for this tour.
Yeah, and drove us there, and it just blew us away. And
once again, just meeting these strangers and having them to go above and beyond, it never ceased to amaze us what people would do.
Over the coming weeks and months of their journey, there would be many more instances of total strangers welcoming them into their homes. Like, there was this one time when they were passing through a small town and a woman let them stay in a spare room in her farmhouse. She was super excited because they were the first guests she'd ever had. So she had her husband slaughter a sheep for a special dinner and she baked them a cake. Then she called all her extended family to come over to meet Justin and Patrice. Another time, they were camping in a hut when they met this really nice couple who were visiting from Wellington. They all seemed to hit it off, so they exchanged contact info, and this couple said, "Hey, drop us a line when you get to our city, and maybe we'll help you stock up on supplies," or something like that. But then Justin said when he and Patrice arrived,
and it really did spiral into, well, you can stay a night. Oh, you can stay as many nights as you want. And we want to take you scuba diving. We want to take you to the museum. And I mean, the funny thing is we walked into the house and I went into the living room and I saw pictures of this man with the Queen, with President Obama, with President Clinton, with all of these medals and things. And so during dinner, I just said, may I ask, who are you? And his wife's like, you can tell him. And he was a very, very prominent person in the New Zealand Navy. Let's just say he might have been the top dog of the New Zealand Navy. And so just super nice folks, and we're still in contact with them.
Justin and Patrice kept experiencing this incredible hospitality in all sorts of places and situations, even when they least expected it.
We were walking down a desolate road in the middle of nowhere, and we hadn't seen people in a couple days. And all of a sudden, we saw this gentleman drive by on a four-wheeler with a huge basket on the front and all of these dead possums in this basket. Now, possums are a problem in New Zealand. They were introduced, and they're trying to eradicate them. So they hire people to go out and to kill these possums. And he drove by us. He had all these possums in his basket, a big gun across it, and he waved to us. And, of course, we waved to him. And, we hiked, and hours later, we're looking for a place to camp. We're looking for some water. We see this little tiny house off in the distance, kind of tucked back on the field. And I said, I'm going to go ask these folks if we can have some water, if we can camp maybe out in the paddock out there in the farmland there. And as we're walking up, I see the four-wheeler and I see the possums. And the gentleman is sitting on the steps of his house right there with his gun across his legs saying, I was wondering when you two were going to show up. We said, oh, I'm so sorry to disturb you. I said, is there any way that we could sleep maybe out there in the front of your lawn and maybe we could just get a little water? And he said, listen, I have to go make a phone call. And he goes, I need to go up there. And he points so far up on a mountain. He's like, that's where my cell service works. So I'll be back in about an hour or two. He said, why don't you just make yourself at home? Go inside, take a shower, relax, help yourself, cook some dinner, whatever you need. I'll be back in an hour or two. We didn't even get this guy's name, and he left. And he said, make sure you set up your tent right next to the house. I think that's important. And again, just the nicest guy in the world, and he had no idea who we were.
When they weren't meeting strangers, Justin and Patrice said there were long stretches when they were hiking alone in the wilderness, and it was absolutely beautiful with every type of landscape imaginable, from beaches and farmland to mountains, alpine lakes, and dense jungle-like forests.
A lot of times it's kind of a choose-your-own-adventure where you can either go this way or that way. And so, for example, about 56 miles of the trail is down the middle of a raging river, and you have to paddle it. And that is so exciting to put your backpack down and paddle for a couple days down this beautiful river in a kayak or canoe.
But it was also pretty tough and rugged in parts, with all sorts of challenges like having to navigate around quicksand or other obstacles in their way.
There was one point where we got to a place, and this trail is so new that it says you need to cross this big body of water. The way to do that, look for a fisherman to ask him if you can hop in their boat to get across the water. The best time to do this is at 5 a.m. And this is the only thing the trail notes say. And so we get there, and I think we got there like 6 o'clock in the evening. So we're walking down the street of this small community, and I asked one person, I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't have a boat. I asked this other lady, and she's like, well, we do have a boat. And I think my son could take you across tomorrow morning. That could work out. She goes, well, you know what? Walk down the street, go 2 houses down, knock on the door. That's my dad. Tell him you should stay on his lawn. So we knock, we tell him, and the guy's like, oh, yes, please come in. And we sleep on his lawn. He invites us into the art studio and shows us all of everything he's done. He wants to tell us about his whole life in New Zealand. We're having dinner with him and eating. And then the next morning, the son comes and picks us up in his little boat and takes us across this body of water.
After about 4 months on the trail, they were finally nearing the end when something else unexpected happened after they reconnected with someone they had met earlier in their journey.
So on day 22 of the trail, we had a gentleman pick us up and drive us about 5 minutes to a town. And he said to us, I've heard of this trail and I've hiked portions of it. He said, when you get to the very bottom of the South Island, I live in a little town called Invercargill. He said, give me a call. Here's my name, and hopefully I can meet up with you. And we ended up reaching out to him about, 3 months later. And we were telling him, we're going to finish the trail on this day. We're so excited. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't join you. I am not in town. I am out away business. And we thought, no problem. We just want to reach out and say hi, and that's it. As we were walking to the sign at Bluff, we see this guy standing there with a bottle of champagne. And he wasn't on a business trip. He was just surprising us and congratulating us and wanted to be there. And we had champagne with him, and he celebrated our victory of walking this trail. And then we had a nice dinner and went out with him. And it was just crazy. That doesn't happen.
I really don't know how we left an impact with him. Up on the North Island on day 22, it was 5 minutes that we were in the car with him. So he wanted to be there for this monumental ending and to celebrate with us because he's just that nice.
Yeah.
By the end of their hike, Patrice and Justin had totally fallen in love with New Zealand and were yearning to see more.
Our focus was the trail. We're kind of goal-oriented people. Now, we realized there are times when maybe we couldn't finish if we got hurt, but we love to finish this trail. So only these few occasions that we take days off to see things, and it was very few. I think we took maybe 6 days off completely the whole time we were there. So we said we need to go explore these places that we hadn't seen. And we were like, well, we'll rent a car and drive around New Zealand. We had someone who said, would you like to take my camper van? I'm leaving. I'm going back to the United States. He had bought a van here, and he said, you can borrow it. Take it after you're done with the trail and just drive around. And we're like, That's
ridiculous.
You just met us, and you're going to give us your camper van. He said, yeah, I'll leave the keys. It's here. You take it. And we're like, no, I don't feel comfortable with that. We'll hitchhike. Thank you.
The biggest takeaway from our experience in New Zealand is that you might go into a trip thinking that you are going to experience one thing and you come away with experiencing another. And so for Justin and I, we really are all about hiking this trail, but what we came away with was this huge cultural understanding of Kiwis and New Zealand and the whole country. And we would love to go back. We would love to live there in New Zealand. We dream about it every day. And I just think that Kiwis taught us to be more open-minded and to really let your guard down every once in a while when you feel like you can do it safely, and to open your minds and hearts to other travelers and people.
The willingness to just go out of their way for complete strangers is something we don't typically see in the United States. I think, especially the last 4 years in the United States, things have been, a little rough, and people haven't been the nicest to each other. And going over there, it kind of changed our attitude a little bit to be like, maybe we need to take the time to answer this person's question on the street that they're coming up to ask us, or, listen to people and respect people's opinions, And
I would say our experience in New Zealand really solidified how hospitable Justin and I wanted to be. We were already working in the hospitality industry, whether we were managing a bed and breakfast for somebody else or we were managing a hiker hostel. And just in general, that level of hospitality that we experienced in New Zealand, we wanted to play it forward. We wanted to be those people to let down our guard a little bit and be able to open the doors so widely and not have any sort of preordained notion about what people were going to be like, and just be able to be those people.
Like most of us, Patrice and Justin aren't doing much traveling these days. They're instead riding out the pandemic in a 300-square-foot cabin near Alaska's Denali National Park. Once things are back to normal, they hope to travel more on the domestic front. Specifically, they have their eyes set on Hawaii, the only U.S. state they haven't been to yet. And they also want to achieve their goal of visiting all 60 or so national parks, as well as climbing the highest peak in every state in the country. So far, they've climbed 43, so they have just 7 left to go. Thanks so much to Justin and Patrice for sharing their stories. If you want to hear more about their adventure, Patrice just wrote a book called Between Each Step, a married couple's through hike on New Zealand's Te Araroa. You could get a copy on their website, which I'll link to in the show notes, as well as from my website at farfromhomepodcast.org. Remember, you could follow Far From Home on Instagram or Facebook. I'm also on Twitter at Scott Gurian. If you like this podcast, I'd love if you could help spread the word on social media so more people find out about it, and consider posting a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. My show's logo comes from Polemic, which designs award-winning experiences all over the world at the intersection of culture, commerce, and community. Find out how they could help your business at polemicdesign.com. My credit music is a song called Bachata Luna by my friend and colleague violinist David Shulman. If you like it, you could check out more of his work at his website, quietlifemotel.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.